Thank you, Rod, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for getting up early today and coming to breakfast with me. So, I don't particularly like early mornings, and you guys in your industry probably have quite a lot of them. But anyway, yesterday morning I was lying in bed, and before the sun came up, I was woken up fairly abruptly, and that particular time I was listening to what woke me up. And we're on a fairly standard suburban block in Brisbane, and we have a next door neighbour called Elvis who likes to sing early in the morning, and quite often Elvis wakes me up early in the morning. Now, it doesn't particularly impress me being woken up by a singing Elvis next door. You see, Elvis is a chicken, and Elvis is quite aptly named because he does love to sing. For me, if I'd been given this speech more than a couple of years ago, it would have been probably a little bit more boring, but the key question that I would have was, could somebody please come and get rid of Elvis for me? I'm sure you guys have a way. But the funny thing is now, the perspective that I have now when I get woken up by Elvis is quite different. When I get woken up by Elvis now, I think, fantastic, I get another day. I get another day that I wasn't going to have. Because about 2 years ago, as Rod mentioned, I wasn't meant to sort of pull through. They gave me about a 1% chance of getting through the operation where they were taking the remaining 3 limbs off my body at once. So every single day I wake up, I'm thankful for being here. I'm thankful for every moment, and there's amazing things that happen every single day. So fast forward to today, waking up. You've all come here for whatever reason is in your mind to come to a breakfast after most of you probably had a fairly big night last night. So it's a pretty big commitment. Now, I don't know exactly why you might have come here today, but I can probably surmise a couple of things. One thing is that you decided to be with other people for whatever reason. You could have breakfast in your hotel room or the local cafe, but for some reason you decided to come together to either meet either people, listen to someone. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. But the other thing, I think everybody has an aspiration for each day, whether they know it or not. And that's simply to enjoy the day, to be happy. I don't think anyone wakes up going, you know what, I'm going to be absolutely miserable today. You might end up that way, unfortunately, but hopefully you don't start the day that way. So today I thought I would talk about something pretty simple, and that is happiness. Now, if you listen to the Dalai Lama, he does have a very good saying about the purpose of our life is to be happy. Now, I kind of got asked a few months ago to give a talk about happiness, and I kind of scratched my head, what makes me happy? So I did the usual thing and I Googled happy. You get a lot of stuff, it's pretty interesting. But I summarised it down to, I looked at a little bit of research and then picked, as per most researchers do, I picked the one that I liked, not necessarily the one that's good. But the key 3 things that I found that have helped me get through what has happened to me and still be essentially happy. And the 3 things that are particularly important to me, I'm going to go through those. The third most important one that I wanted to talk about was what I really talk about as the Monty Python principle. I won't sing it because my singing's pretty terrible, but I think you probably may remember the good old song, Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. And that is around a positive attitude. Now, for me, I think a positive attitude is very different to positive thinking. If you wake up and go, just start thinking positive, that's not really what I'm talking about. For me, what's helped me in relation to a positive attitude is probably two key steps. The first is coming to terms and accepting whatever you've got, whatever situation you're in, and that can be pretty difficult. The second is then making a choice. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do next? What are the opportunities for you? So a couple of the stories that relate to that for me in relation to, first of all, acceptance, happened to me when, after 3 weeks of being in a coma, being woken up by my beautiful wife Diane, for her to have to tell me what had happened to me. I'd been effectively in an induced coma since the time I walked into hospital. So I was waking up in a scenario where I had no limbs remaining. I also, obviously couldn't move. I had a tube stuck down my throat. I had a nasal feeding tube. I was on dialysis. I'd lost the sight of one eye, and I'd lost the hearing in one ear. And so that was kind of the state that I kind of woke up in. I do joke a little bit later, there's not much left to lose, but then the doctors reminded me there was. So, it didn't work very much. So anyway, Diane had to sort of run me through what had happened to me while I had been in my beauty sleep. And the doctors had prepared her for, me to be fairly surprised and, angry and end up in a deep state of depression for quite some time. Something unusual happened that particular day when Diane told me. She was running through, fairly chronologically. She's an engineer, I'm an engineer, so I need it very rational. So she was very great in explaining in a way that I could understand. And I remember her telling me what had happened, sort of blow by blow, and then, me just thinking, okay, I understand what has happened to me. And although there are moments of sadness, and there were in that particular explanation when Diane talked about having to bring in the kids to say goodbye to me while I was asleep, the overarching feeling for me was I was going to be okay. Now, I think a really critical thing in that, and maybe a learning for others, is that for me, it wasn't really what was said, it was who was saying it. Diane was there, she was telling me, so I just knew it was going to be okay. So when there's bad news or there are things to be told that are difficult, or there's news to be told, don't send anyone else who may not have a good relationship with that person. Send somebody who actually has a trusting relationship that people can actually listen and actually truly hear the intent of what's being said. So from that point of acceptance, you then have, as I said, a mention of choice. Okay, I'm in this situation. What am I actually going to do about it? And those choices can happen on many, many occasions. Like in your industries, I'm sure there are lots of things that happen that change the course of what's going on. Crisis came up, public expectation changes. You can either fight that or you can accept that's just what it is. And so what are the opportunities that then arise out of that? And I'm seeing your conference, there's probably a lot of things that you're talking about in relation to that, which is fantastic. So for me, opportunities come across in many different scenarios. One particular example that I had that I kind of remember was when I just got home from hospital, which was quite an exciting time for me. And then probably a couple of weeks later, my third son, Will, who's really a party on legs, one of those kids who's always smiling, came home and said, Mum and Dad, I've got show and tell. And I've told the teacher what I'm going to do for my show and tell. So we went, okay, Will, what is it? He said, I'm going to take Dad for show and tell. Like you normally take a pet rock or, something like that. So we kind of scratched our heads and went, oh, okay, rightio. And, Di rang the teacher and went, are you okay? And she said yes, and we were like, okay, fine. So I proceeded to be rolled in for My son's grade 2 show and tell. Now, they're normally about 5 minutes long. This one was about 50 minutes. So as I was rolling in, Will was on the side of the wheelchair here with one hand punching the air and one leg in the air, a bit like the Titanic scene singing "I Am King of the World." And then at that particular point, as we're rolling into the room, I remember thinking, maybe we should have rehearsed this. He then proceeded to kind of instruct me on what he wanted me to do. So first thing he wanted me to do was jump out of the chair and walk across the room, which I obligingly did. So, you know, I can lower this chair down, jump out and walk across the floor. Anyway, as I'm walking across the floor, I all of a sudden feel this thing slipping underneath me, and then realise that my pants are starting to slide off. So as I'm going, I'm trying to flick my leg up to try and catch my legs. I kind of remember thinking, this is great. The only thing these kids are ever going to remember about this talk is Will's dad's pants coming off. Anyway, I managed to collect myself, and that didn't happen. Then proceeded to put my arms on, prosthetic arms on and off, and show the kids what I could do. And then they started firing questions, and I tell you what, if any of you have any questions, they're no more inappropriate than a grade 2 class. So, you know, we kind of went through all these questions. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you drive a car? Can you play basketball? And a lot of the answers were no. But the thing that sticks in my mind was Will's teacher, a lovely lady, Natalie, just calmed the kids down because they were getting pretty excited at this stage, and said, you know what, rather than asking Mr. Ames whether he can do something or not, just ask him what he can do. And for me, if I list those things that I can't do, yeah, there's quite a lot of things that I can't do that I used to be able to do. But if I list those things that I can do, there's a long list as well. So it's just a choice as to which ones I focus on at any particular time. So when it comes to a positive attitude, just remember, you've got to accept what is there. And that doesn't mean just think about the fun stuff. You've got to accept the sad things. You've got to accept the hard things. You've got to accept those things that are particularly painful. Yeah, be okay about being sad. Don't let it consume you. But also accept that there's opportunities. You realise there's a choice, and you can work out what you're going to do with it.